following is a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
President Biden buckles down on the classified materials found in now 4 locations that he has had since he was vice president of the United States. The GOP is still in an uproar, asking why there are 2 different justice systems in the United States. Are there, in fact, 2 different justice systems in this case? The GOP, led by Buddy Carter from Georgia, have put forward a bill for a 23% tax on all things we buy: groceries, homes, healthcare, etc. They also want to abolish the IRS. Is this a good idea, or is this just another virtue signal? A dress code for female lawmakers in Missouri has recently been instituted. What is the end goal on this, and why is this the main focus for the state of Missouri? New appointments in the 118th Congress as Marjorie Traitor Greene, Paul Gosar, Lauren Boebert, and George Santos have all been given assignments. Should we, the people, be concerned? The 6-year-old child who shot his teacher and Virginia's parents made an official statement. What has been the fallout and the reaction of the populace? Ron DeSantis cancels an African American studies class, says it's vague and doesn't have the right context in it. What exactly is he talking about? First he canceled CRT, now he's canceling African American studies. Finally, 3 people get life in prison for the murder of a Dollar General security guard due to the guard enforcing a mask mandate. All this on this week's event. This week's current events on tap. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and all fellow listeners. How is everybody doing this week? This is your host, Alex Kirsch. Welcome to another event and another episode of Current Events on Tap with your host, Alex Kirsch, a podcast from the Alex Kirsch Project. That's me, Army retiree, truck driver, pragmatic, progressive, political commentator. If this is your first time listening, please do me a solid and hit like and share and subscribe to my Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and my iHeartRadio. This podcast gives you this week's current events and also do what I like to call
the Beer of the Week.
The Beer of the Week is where I pick one beer and I rate it based upon price and presentation, pour, aroma, taste, and then I give it an overall rating. Be sure to catch me every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker, and catch me at your earliest convenience on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just type in the Alex Kirsch Project, or you can type in Current Events on Tap, and there you will find this podcast. Be advised, there will be coarse language in this podcast. I do apologize in advance, but I am a veteran and a truck driver. It is a part of my vocabulary. And how is everybody doing? I'm sorry I did not do a show last week. I didn't do a show last week because I had a lot of stuff going in the house. It's all about, the beauties of being a homeowner is there's a lot of things that you got to get taken care of. There's like stuff you got to clean up. So let's just say that, that took priority over the podcast, but that's okay. I can always just jump back on it, and it's my podcast. I can do whatever the hell I want to, whenever I want to, kind of deal. So, but last week is actually kind of a busy week as well because I went to a brainstorming meeting with the members of the Tuscola County Democratic Party, and we actually had a couple guests from the Michigan League of Conservation Voters, a nonpartisan organization. I tell you what, it was probably the best, some of the best, learning, what can I say about, they shared a lot of insight of what it means to, get across to some people, because the thing is they focus on the fact that they are very nonpartisan. And they go with candidates, whether they're Republican or Democrat, that are willing to work with them to be environmentally sound, to make decisions that are beneficial to the environment, which I think is really, really important because, the environment is a very important one because guess what? We only have one planet, so it's something we do have to focus upon. But they gave us a lot of insight about what it means to appeal to people's senses and understand this is why these things are important. So hopefully we're going to be able to pick their brains and find out what exactly we can do to get across our message for the progressive movement in regards to this. But, long story short, it was a very, very busy week. It's another busy week. And I tell you what, oh my goodness, has it been another week for current events. But before we go into current events, it's time for
the Beer of the Week.
This week's beer of the week is Atomic Pumpkin by the New Belgium Brewery based out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Now, before I actually talk about the beer, let's talk about the history of the brewery it comes from. The New Belgium Brewery was founded by Kim Jordan and Jeff Lebesch after a bike trip through Belgium that inspired them to bring the Belgian-style beers to their hometown of Fort Collins, Colorado in 1988. In 1991, they installed their first beer equipment in their basement. When New Belgium first kicked off, Kim was the one-size-fits-all, do-it-all kind of person. She bottled, was a sales rep, marketer, financial planner, and the CEO. The first beers that were made was Fat Tire, which is a very fine beer that I do plan on reviewing, and also a Belgian-style double called Abbey. In 1991, they sold their first beers at the Colorado Beers Festival. In October of 1993, the Abbey Ale wins a gold medal at the American Beer Festival in Denver. After a few years, New Belgium decides to relocate to a bigger facility just right down the road. Early 2000, they bottled their first batch of La Folie Sour Brown Ale. Its first bottle was aged in a collection of French oak wine barrels. As of December 2012, New Belgium has become 100% employee-owned. ESOP, which stands for the Employee Stock Ownership Plan, bought the remaining shares from CEO Kim Jordan and her family and went from 41.5% ownership to 100% ownership with a total of 456 co-workers. If you're interested in trying out their products, they have the classic Fat Tire, Voodoo Ranger Juice Force IPA, which I have reviewed, a very delicious ale, a variety of fruit smash hand seltzer in flavors like citrus punch, berry blast, tropical mango, and pink lemonade. Now, about this beer, it has an alcohol percentage of 6.4%, and the type of beer it is, it's a pumpkin beer. Now, let's go into price and presentation. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 for average. I bought a 6-pack from Walmart here in Carroll, Michigan, because as someone who likes all different kinds, I was really intrigued by the name Atomic Pumpkin. I mean, come on. How can you not like a name like that? It's pretty clever. It was less than $12 for a 6-pack of cans, and it has the can itself has a typical voodoo logo, the skeleton with the cold weather hat on, and that same typical orange color to it. What's funny about that is they X'd out the special release and put in spicy release just above the top, which is a bit funny because, you know, the beer is just, you know, a little spicy.
Why is it spicy?
It has a nice presentation to it, and the price is fairly average for a beer like this. Pour, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. It's a very average pour, not too much to risk of the foamy head peeking out of the top. Yes, once you actually pour it in, you do get the foamy head, but it quickly disappears, like it's gone like within a minute, I found. Not exactly very appealing. I like the foamy head to kind of like hang out for a little bit, you know, because I like to get to know it, you know, get to know the foamy head for a little bit, find out what it likes to do, if it likes to take long walks to the beach, the whole nine. The color is almost kind of like a reddish brown color to it. It's similar to other beers that I've poured, but this one would have been better rated if the foamy head just kind of stuck around just a little bit longer, got to know it, got its phone number, its email address, it has a Facebook account, the whole nine. Aroma. You know, let's take another whiff real quick just to solidify my rating on it. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 still. It still smells sweet like a pumpkin pie. Now, if you don't pick up too many other aromas, I just don't really smell them too much. They said there's like a spicy habanero taste to it, but I don't really pick up the smell of it when I'm smelling it initially. Now, I'm a big fan of pumpkin pie, and I have sampled many different kinds of pumpkin beers, but this one has a very, very pleasant aroma to it. Now, the taste, time to take a drink. Yep, I'm keeping it at a 3 out of 5. It doesn't taste nearly as good as it smells, but it's not an unpleasant beer. The spicy flavor in the beer I feel is a bit unnecessary. It's kind of overkill. It's not awful, but I think if you're going to go for a pumpkin, go for the pumpkin. The spicy flavor just seems to take away from the pumpkin flavor. I mean, again, it's not horrible, but I think if it was more like a pumpkin creamy flavor, you know, kind of just like add a little bit of texture to it, you know, like pumpkin creamy of some sort would have been much better in my personal opinion. I do think it's a better idea like that instead of a spicy pumpkin. It's not awful, but very average. I mean, when I had the Blake's Hard Cider, it was like the mango habanero. Like, that was really good. Like, the mango and the habanero, they blended together really beautifully. This one, not so much. I feel like if you're going to have spicy and then pumpkin, I just don't think they really go together. But that's my personal opinion. So, overall, let's give it a 3 out of 5. It's going to get a strong 3 out of 5. I do think it's above average, but not enough to be a 4. It's not a bad beer. I'd buy it again, but it took me quite a while to get through this 6-pack. I mean, some beers, you know, I don't drink as much as I used to, but like there are some beers I could just like kill a 6-pack in a single evening because it tastes so good and it's really smooth. This one, I'm kind of pacing. It's like a sipping kind of beer for me. So, but do I recommend it? I would recommend it, but I think it takes a certain palate, to appreciate all the flavors this beer has to offer. I mean, again, when you smell it, you can smell the pumpkin. When you taste it, you taste the pumpkin and the spiciness, but I don't know. Some people might actually love it. Now, if you want to try something different, then I say go ahead and give this beer a try. If pumpkin and spicy flavors is your go-to, then guess what? This is your beer to go to. Again, not a terrible beer, just not my favorite. Above average, but not enough to beat a 4 out of 5. Anyway, now, on to tonight's topics. So, President Biden is in hot water for him now having the same problem in regards to the possession of classified materials that he has no business having. Mind you, these documents have been found in other unsecured locations to include his garage. Now, for the record, I want to know, like anyone else, what were those documents were doing there? Now, Attorney General Merrick Garland has launched an investigation with a special counsel to lead that investigation. Now, for the record, I fully support this. I don't believe anybody is above the law. No, not a president, a former vice president, current president, what have you. Nobody is above the law. If you are in possession of classified material that is in fact unsecured and you are in fact mishandling it, we the people have the right to know these things, and you should definitely suffer some sort of consequences. Now, we don't know if any consequences are going to come to the president, because as of right now, he is the president. He could get impeached for stuff like this, but I'm not trying to jump the gun just yet right now. Now, big surprise, though, the GOP, they are all up in arms about this, though. As of right now, they are pissed off that Joe Biden is not being held to account for this. They are pissed off that the FBI raided their Lord and Savior, Donald J. Trump's Mar-a-Lago mansion, but they're not raiding Joe Biden's houses in Delaware. Well, I'm going to explain this to y'all in perfect detail, that while there might be two systems of justice out there, it doesn't apply in this case, okay? For starters, it took about 500 days to launch an investigation into Donald Trump, who had possession of his classified documents. Because each time when the Mar-a-Lago raid happened, first he denied it, then he said, well, this is fake news, they planted it there. Then he said, well, wait a second, I classified all these documents. And they says, well, wait a second. I mean, each time his story has changed, his reasoning for having these documents changed, and all he did was lie and project about how everybody else, including Barack Obama, had millions of classified documents. But guess what? As typical, Trump did not have a single shred of proof to back up his argument. Trump failed to cooperate with the National Archives and Record Administration, also known as NARA, after multiple attempts to try to get these documents that they knew he had. Then finally, they got some insider information saying, yes, he still has these classified documents. They got a warrant. It was blessed off on. And guess what? They executed a perfectly valid warrant on his property. Then he got all these people freaking out. It's like, oh my God, this is the worst attack on American democracy or on this republic, as Mark Levin had said, which he's 100% wrong about. But the fact of the matter is that his own lawyer, even Christina Bobb, signed a document under penalty of perjury that there were no other classified documents at the residence. This was before the actual raid, mind you. She signed on a document saying there are no classified documents here and put herself into complete legal jeopardy. She has to get her own lawyer out of this, okay? Now, Trump refused to cooperate with NARA. He refused to cooperate with the authorities. He's still refusing to cooperate to this day. He's still projecting like how he's the innocent person in regards to this, and still insists that he did absolutely nothing wrong. Biden and his administration, however, are cooperating. That's the difference. They're even doing a deep clean to find out if any other records are out and about. When they discovered the first batch, they notified NARA immediately and went through proper protocol. Guess how long it took for this investigation to start? 75 days. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm confused, maybe I just have too much TDS. But maybe in some crazy world, 75 days is more than 500 days. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too much of an idiot. Maybe I'm too much TDS. I don't know. Maybe I haven't figured it out quite yet. But the fact is, 75 days for an investigation with a president in office, and they're being fairly transparent about it. Now, again, I'm not condoning this behavior. I think it's absolutely shady. It's like, wait a second, what are you doing with these documents? You had these documents when you were no longer the vice president of the United States? What were you doing with these documents? I'm in full support of this. And just about everybody out there, especially those that support Joe Biden, say, well, wait a second. Yes, let's investigate this and find out more about this. You couldn't even get that from the GOP. You definitely couldn't get it from the MAGA people. All they did was just cry foul and talk about how this is the greatest attack on a republic in American history, which is completely absurd. Now, there's a huge – the situations that I've played out are entirely different in that regard. Now, the only thing that makes them similar is they show one thing, that's there's a serious problem in the handling of classified material within our United States government. Now, the penalty should be the same across the board, regardless of the position of office you might hold. Now, I know that's completely unrealistic. However, the fact of the matter is we've had people that have leaked classified material, and they've had to pay the piper for it. And guess what? They definitely do deserve it. There are those out there that think, oh, wait a second, I think we have a right to know this material. And I say, no, the hell you don't. There's a lot of classified material that a lot of people in the public have no right knowing. And the reason why that is because you don't really understand like how complex government entities work and how these operations take place. You got operational security that gives the location, talks about like, hey, this is what our troops are doing. This is their current standing. This is how many people they have readily available to deploy. Things like that. The people do not need to know about that. The only people they need to know about that are the people in positions of power. And as far as like confidential or classified material, that stuff is like way above our level. Like the common person like Jim Bob that works at a McDonald's drive-through or something like that, he doesn't need to know what this classified material has to say. Now, if there's like a time limit for this classified material where it can then be declassified to non-classified or unclassified to where the people can read it, then yeah, absolutely. Disclose it. Let's see it. Let's let the people decide it then. But classified material is classified for a specific reason. Now, if it's something that's being hidden, then yeah, but you still have to go through an entire process to declassify the material. And again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. The idea that Donald Trump can just go in front of an entire stash, box upon box upon box of classified material and say, I declassify you, without even reading what's in these contents is completely irresponsible. Because if that was the case, then everything he had declassified should be available for everybody to read, especially if it's been declassified to the unclassified level. But it isn't. It hasn't. None of this stuff has been disclosed to the public. Why? Because Donald Trump, like always, is lying. I'm definitely saying he's lying because that's all he frickin' does is lie. The man is a compulsive liar. Now, has Joe Biden lied? Oh, of course he has. Like, I don't believe he's insisted that, like, for example, he marched with Nelson Mandela or knew Nelson Mandela. I mean, he might have known the guy, but I don't think they were as tight as he might have said they were. But yeah, I get it. Joe Biden isn't exactly perfect either. But the thing is, he is cooperating. He's cooperating with the authorities. They're looking into this. They're investigating all the possible locations, but they're cooperating. Donald Trump doesn't cooperate. He still doesn't want to cooperate. He insists that he is always the victim. He insists that he is always the person being targeted. He always insists that he is out there, that they're not coming for me, they're coming for you. He always says like that stuff to weaponize your patriotism against the rest of the federal government. It's absurd, it's ridiculous, and people have got to start waking up to this. But again, if Joe Biden, if the president was, in fact, hiding classified material, I'm not going to say hiding classified material. Now, for example, I don't think this shit was planted, honestly. I don't think these documents were planted because the fact they're being so transparent about it. But if they decide to impeach, yes, absolutely, go for it. I'm going to be consistent in this regard. If you're going to mishandle classified material, you got to pay the price for it. It's that simple. Now, I'm not expecting anybody to go to prison for this because it's the lower peons and the lower echelon people like myself. If we had classified material, we would lose our clearance if we had it. We might risk going to jail for stuff like this. But the thing is, though, when you get your classified material ranking and stuff like that, when you get your security clearance, you understand these things. They tell you these things. It's like, if you leak this or if you mishandle this, you can be penalized for it. And we understand these things. Now, these laws aren't the same across the board. People in certain higher echelon positions are not going to be punished like the rest of us. They might get fired, they might be forced to resign, but they might keep their pension, though. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, and I don't like it, but you know what? It's just how things work. So at the end of the day, the situations are similar in this regard. There seems to be a great deal of problem with elected officials mishandling classified material, and we've got to crack down on this. But the only reason why they are not the same is because one side refused to cooperate. One side has consistently denied that they are at fault. One side has insisted that other people are to blame for their screw-ups. The other side's like, yeah, we screwed up. Here, just do a complete deep dive. One side's cooperating. One side is still refusing to cooperate. So, Representative Buddy Carter, a Republican from Georgia, has pushed forward a bill to be passed by the House, to the Senate, to the President. It's called the Fair Tax Act of 2023. It's going to institute a blanket tax at 23%. That's right, 23%. Now, articles have said 30%, but it says 23% in the bill itself. For all things people in this country may buy. Groceries, healthcare, buying a house, etc. Now, I'm going to read just like the summary of what the bill states, all right? This bill imposes a national sales tax on the use or consumption in the United States of taxable property or services in lieu of the current income taxes, payroll taxes, and estate and gift taxes. The rate of the sales tax will be 23% in 2025, with adjustments to the rate of in subsequent years. There are exemptions from the tax for used and intangible property, for property or services purchased for business, export, or investment purposes, and for state government functions. Under the bill, family members who are are lawful U.S. residents receive a monthly sales tax rebate, family consumption allowance, based upon criteria related to family size and poverty guidelines. The states, I say again, the states have the responsibility for administering, collecting, and remitting the sales tax to the Treasury. Tax revenues are to be allocated among the General Revenue, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, the Disability Insurance Trust Fund, the Hospital Insurance Trust Fund, and the Federal Supplementary Medical Insurance Trust Fund. No funding is authorized for the operations of the Internal Revenue Service after fiscal year 2027. You're going to hear me talk more about that in a second. Finally, the bill terminates the national sales tax if the 16th Amendment to the Constitution is not repealed within 7 years of the enactment of this bill. Now, for those not aware, this is what the 16th Amendment to the Constitution states. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. So essentially, this is what this means. They want to get rid of the IRS after 2027. The GOP thinks they've been complaining about the IRS for years. They've been complaining about the IRS being armed. They're complaining about the IRS having bringing on 87,000 more IRS agents, saying, oh my God, they're going to come for your funding. They're coming for your taxes. No, listen, I'm no friend to the IRS. I don't like paying as much taxes as I do. But guess what? Paying taxes is necessary to live in this society. For people who don't really understand that. Your tax dollars goes towards infrastructure. Your tax dollars goes towards the roads that are getting built. Your tax dollars goes towards the military. Your tax dollars goes to so many projects across the country. Now, I question where a lot of our tax dollars go to, just like anybody else. And I think that there needs to be a serious audit about where all of our tax dollars go to. Now, again, I'm not saying that, we have a perfect system over here when it comes to taxes. However, I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, taxation is theft. That's stupid, okay? Saying that taxation is theft is absolutely stupid. And if you're going to try to quote the American Revolution, well, guess what? It's time for you to strap on your combat boots and do something about it, which I know you're not going to because you're too much of a coward. It's that simple. I do not encourage violence whatsoever, so don't take this out of context. But I just tend to think that people just speak on their high horses about how they don't want to pay taxes because they think taxation is theft. Listen, you live in this country. You pay taxes. It's that simple. If you don't want to pay taxes in this country, then move someplace else that you don't want to. But you're not going to do that because this is a good country and you're going to live here and you're going to complain about it because you have that right to complain. You have the right to complain about your government taxing you way too much. You feel you're being taxed to death. And corporations are going to complain about being taxed to death. Even though they are consistently getting tax bailouts, they're continuing to give themselves better bonuses while laying off 1,600 workers, 2,000 workers, however many workers to make better ends meet. It's just how things work. It's why some people are so critical of the capitalist system. Now, I know that capitalism has a lot of problems with it, but I'm still a firm believer that capitalism is better than most other systems, actually. It has its flaws like anything else, but guess what? I still support it because I know there are good capitalists out there, but there's a lot of shady people out there, but you're going to get shadiness regardless of any economic system you come across. But the fact of the matter is, once again, they are looking to just do a 23% flat tax across the board for everything because they think this is actually fair. This is not fair. This is actually dangerous because there are people out there that can't afford to pay that 23% taxes for these things, and it's just going to add up. It's just going to – people are going to have to pay this whether you realize it or not. And you think, oh, well, you know, that just means everybody will pay this 20%. Well, guess who's going to make off like bandits with this? That's right, the top 1%. The people you seem to want to defend all the frickin' time. The top 1% are the ones that are going to complain about the fact that raising taxes on them. They can afford to pay these taxes. However, us, like, I'm sure that I would be okay, but I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about other people that will barely struggle to make ends meet because of a tax code like this. Because you got to be able to buy groceries. You got to be able to get health care. The thing is, the GOP has not brought forth a health care bill since Obama was in office. They always said that, oh, this Obamacare is a terrible thing. We'll bring something else better forward. But they don't. They still haven't brought forth any kind of a health care bill whatsoever. They had a chance to bring something better for infrastructure, but they didn't. But the majority agreed. There was enough to agree upon it to get the infrastructure bill passed, which I am glad it did. But this just sounds like another virtue signal, honestly. This is not a good idea. This is a bad idea. And getting rid of the IRS because they might have hurt your fees or something like that is completely absurd. Again, I'm not a fan of the IRS, but they are necessary in order for a society like ours to exist. Now, you can complain. You could say, oh, my God, they're bleeding us dry. Oh, my God, we're getting taxed way too much. Well, I get that, okay? I understand that sometimes you're paying taxes and you don't like paying taxes. Again, I don't like paying taxes, but I do it. Why? Because I feel it's my duty as an American to do so. Because I know that my taxes go towards organizations that I fully support, let alone the fact it's paying for my health care and the health care for other military veterans that are suffering still to this day. And my tax dollars are going towards, you know, rebuilding highways, building bridges, you know, fixing tunnels, whatever you got to do. I fully support it. This is necessary in a society like ours. If you don't like paying taxes, well, that's just too damn bad. You live in the United States of America. We pay taxes over here. You're not going to start a revolution over taxes. That ship has sailed. You're going to pay the taxes, and you're going to be freaking happy about it. Shut up, suck it up, drive on, drink some water, take a knee, do what you got to do. Just get over it. You're paying the damn taxes. This is a bad idea. Joe Biden has already said, I'm not going to sign a bill like this. So it's not even going to pass the Senate, so I'm not even really too worried about this. But I had to talk about this because it's so absurd that the GOP even brought this forward. What a joke. So the Missouri State Republicans have passed legislation telling Democratic lawmakers that women need to dress more appropriately in order to maintain a professionalism inside the chamber. Ann Kelly, who is the Republican state representative, was the one who introduced the ruling and said the policy is for women to essentially adhere to a similar dress code that male lawmakers adhere to, which includes jacket, shirt, and tie. Of all the issues that Missouri is focused upon, this is really not that big of an issue. And what I'm saying not a big of an issue is because you're focusing on what women wear. Really? I mean, what in the Handmaid's Tale Cinnamon Toast Crunch fresh hell is this? I mean, seriously. focusing upon what women are wearing because you think that they need to be more modest or they need to dress a certain way because you want there to be equality across the... No, that's a stupid thing to focus upon. All this does is, once again, it puts the blame on women for dressing a certain way because you don't want them being dressing a certain way. That's so absolutely stupid. Why are you worried about what women wear? I mean, it's not like they're coming in wearing bikinis in office. Why? Is it because they're showing like skin from their arms? Are you out of your freaking minds? Seriously? Listen, Missouri, if you brought these people into office, if you voted for these people, you need to take a hard look in the mirror and just realize that you've got bigger issues to worry about than worry about what some women might be wearing. For example, Missouri ranks 42nd in healthcare across the country, 30th in education, 23rd in economy, 27th in infrastructure, 45th in crime and corrections, 21st in natural environment, 15th in physical responsibility, and the only thing that you guys got going for you is your 4th in opportunity. I don't even know what that means, but yet for some reason, dress code while you're an elected official is your biggest concern right now. Now, I, for one, don't have to worry about this. Why? Because I'm a man. 2, I don't live in Missouri. But when I first heard about this, I was like, what exactly is their end goal for this? What exactly are they hoping to achieve by this? Is this just another thing for us to take our attention off of so they can try to pass some other bullshit legislation through in their state? I mean, that's entirely possible, but I just find it absolutely just batshit crazy that this is your main focus right now, Missouri. I mean, I just gave it to you like in plain English. It's bad enough that in Missouri, in 2019, a doctor gained access to women's menstrual cycles that also happen to be patients at Planned Parenthood. That is frightening, and that is some medieval shit right there. The fact that you would actually spend more time diving in and learning about women's menstrual cycles, that women that happen to go through a Planned Parenthood clinic. First of all, it's none of your damn business what women are doing at a Planned Parenthood. It's never been any of your business, but you're choosing to make your business. That is your decision to make. It's the wrong decision, frankly. But this is some medieval crap that we do not need to be seeing in this country. Now, I'm not worried about that stuff spreading in Michigan, but I think we should be worried about it spreading across the country. Because there are plenty of people that think like Ann Kelly does across the country. There are plenty of people, especially men, who think like Ann Kelly, thinking that women need to dress more modestly. Because for some reason, they always seem to think that whenever a woman gets, sexually harassed in public, it's her fault because she's dressing a certain way, which is bullshit. It's not her fault for those reasons. Just like if a man is going into a prison cell and he's getting catcalled by their prisoners, it's not his fault. It's because they know that he's got a target on his back and they are coming for him. They are coming for that ass, essentially. It's not okay. Catcalling is not okay. And the reason why I bring this up is because this is what their main focus is upon. They are focusing upon how a woman is dressed and how she's presenting herself. Now, if you were talking about looking professional, are you trying to tell me that a woman that comes in with a nice dress that happens to show some arms is not professional? That's just the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my entire life. This should not be your main focus. Your main focus should be focusing upon the issues that make Missouri a better state. If you're this far behind in healthcare and in education and in crime and corrections, you got some bigger issues to worry about. Not what women are wearing inside of your chambers, if they're representative or whatnot. Blaming women and just putting women as the onus for distracting men is completely out of line. You're focusing on the wrong things, Missouri. It's time for y'all to get your shit together. Stop worrying about dress code. Focus on the issues that actually matter. And I listed those issues. It's going to take you some time, but my God, it's absolutely embarrassing that you are focused on that instead of the issues that truly do matter and what making your state better. Dress code is not that big of a deal. Fix yourself. Jesus. So there's new appointments in the 118th Congress as put out by the new Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. Yes, that's right. Kevin McCarthy is the Speaker of the House. So, with some of his appointments, he's put Marjorie Traitor Greene, yes, I'm going to keep calling her Marjorie Traitor Greene, and Paul Gosar have been appointed to the House Oversight Committee to investigate President Biden and his family and the administration. For what? Yeah, they're still figuring that out. They haven't really decided just yet. they're deciding whether it's going to be about Afghanistan, they're going to do it about like the oil prices, or if they're going to talk about inflation as to why they're going to, Marge is always, she said like his first or second or third day in office, she already had articles of impeachment. But of course, 6 days after January 6th, she was asking for a pardon from then Donald Trump. But, that's none of my business, right? Lord Boebert and Scott Perry, who opposed Kevin McCarthy, are also having positions in the House Oversight Committee. And George Santos, that's right, George Santos received 2 assignments on lower-level committees, the Small Business Committee and the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, because, he's got so much experience in that. If only they had, like, committees for people that speak bullshit. I mean, he would definitely fit in that category. It's that simple. But the thing is that it's mind-boggling how these MAGA Republicans, these people that are Trump loyalists, got put into bigger positions all because Kevin McCarthy, I think he's trying to appeal to Donald Trump. Now, Marjorie Traitor Greene was recently on Sean Hannity's program talking about how all of these appointments are good, and she's going to explain why.
You can see there's a major difference in the leadership with Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House and Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats removed me from committees from things they didn't like on my Facebook years before I became a member of Congress. But you can see that Kevin McCarthy isn't being political. He's removing members of Congress that need to be removed. Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House is doing the right thing and removing these Democrat members that deserve to be removed. Ilhan Omar is another example. She's anti-Semitic and she should not be on foreign affairs. These aren't political things. These are the right things to do.
Oh, you got to be frickin' kidding me. See, first of all, Marge is the last person to be talking about, she's anti-Semitic. This is a woman that associated herself with Nick Fuentes, who is an anti-Semite, along with Paul Gosar, who's also an I didn't say Paul Gosar is, but they both associate with Nick Fuentes, who is an anti-Semite. And she pretends like, I didn't know who he was at the time. This is a woman that said Jewish space lasers caused the fires in California. I mean, for crying out loud, you have got to be kidding me. And don't even get me started about the fact that she's talking about how Ilhan Omar is anti-Semitic. Okay, remember what Marge said about if she was in charge of January 6th? Here, let me refresh your memory.
I come to Washington. I swear in on January 3rd. I get accused of giving insurrection tours, which I thought was hilarious because I couldn't even find the bathroom in the Capitol. True story. Then January 6th happens, and next thing you know, I organized the whole thing along with Steve Bannon here. And I want to tell you something. If Steve Bannon and I had organized that, we would have won. Not to mention, it would have been armed. Yeah. See, that's the whole joke, isn't it? They say that whole thing was planned, and I'm like, are you kidding me? A bunch of conservatives, Second Amendment supporters went in the Capitol without guns, and they think that we organized that? I don't think so.
That is a sitting congresswoman saying, if I would have led January 6th, we would have won. If I would have led insurrection, I would have won. But yet, Ilhan Omar is the problem. No, Marge, you are the problem. Just take for 1 second. If Ilhan Omar said something even remotely close to that, the GOP would be up in arms, asking for her head, asking for her resignation. They would be trying to kick her out of Congress as faster than you can possibly think about. People would be just talking about this for the next year. I mean, they're still accusing her of marrying her brother, where there's no proof of that whatsoever. I'm not even a big fan of Ilhan Omar, but I know bullshit when I see it, and this is nothing but speculation on their part. But the fact of the matter is that Marjorie Traitor Greene said, if I was in charge of January 6th, we would have won. We would have been armed. We would have staged an armed insurrection against our nation's capital. This is a sitting congresswoman saying these things. But yet, for some reason, she still gets a major appointment. She still manages to win her election. These are the times we are living in, folks. These are the times we're living in as of right now. We are living in times where you could actually speak in open protest and say that you are willing to, that if you were in charge of overturning an election, a fair election, that you would win it, and you still get to keep your position. That's frightening to think about. Marjorie Traitor Greene is a sitting congresswoman. She's a woman who actually sides with January 6th rioters over Capitol Police, over the United States military. But she's still a sitting congresswoman. She's been put into the House Oversight Committee, for crying out loud, which is a very important position. Because now their main focus is they're going to bring attention and they're going to bring Joe Biden to justice. Whatever the hell that means. Again, I seriously doubt they're going to find anything, or if they're even going to bring anything to the table. They're just going to waste our time probably, and it's going to be like Benghazi 2.0 essentially. They're going to find something. They're going to try to bring charges all out of retribution. It's not because they care about justice. They're just trying to appease their God Emperor, Trump. That's all they're doing it for. It's not because they give a shit about justice. They don't care about it. It's that simple. And honestly, the fact that George Santos got himself a position too, I mean, obviously because he's a congressman, but the fact that he still has a job, you should all be offended for those that voted, especially in the state of New York. You should be offended at the fact that you voted for this guy. He said that his mother died on 9/11 in the Twin Towers. That's exceedingly offensive. That is a horrendous thing to say, oh, well, you know, my mother died on 9/11 in the Twin Towers, and that turned out to be not true. The fact that he still has a position and the fact that so many people are still sticking up for him is completely beyond me. I just don't get it. I don't know why they are so keen on sticking with each other. I mean, for crying out loud, the Democrats kicked out Al Franken over something he didn't even physically touch Leanne Tweeden, but because of a suggestive photo of his hands in front of her chest. Yeah, he shouldn't have done it, but he took responsibility. They told him he had to resign. He resigned. Matt Gaetz can get accused of trafficking a minor, and they ask him to stay, and he wins re-election. George Santos can lie about his mother dying on 9/11, and he gets to stay. This is how you can now say that the parties are not the same, for crying out loud, because they don't hold each other accountable like everybody else does, like the Democrats do. The Democrats, for some reason, will cut another person loose because they are dead weight to them, and honestly, yes, I get that. But the Republicans, though, will wrap their arms around one another and defend each other until the end of time. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, I don't know what's going to happen when 2024 rolls around, when the next election rolls around, depending on who's going to be running for president and who's going to be the running mate, what have you. But all I'm going to say is these next 2 years are going to be really, really shaky years for Congress, because they're going to try to push forward a bunch of BS bills, but they're not going to get past the Senate because the Democrats have the Senate. Thank frickin' Christ for that, too. And even if it does get past the Senate, if Biden doesn't like it, he's not going to grant it. It's that simple. There's nothing more I can really say on this regard, but just it's going to be a shaky 2 years in the House. That's all I'm going to say about it. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot about my, ooh, geez. Here we go.
I send my kids to school and find myself praying to God that they will return home safely.
Emotional, furious parents vent at school officials in Newport News, Virginia, at the first school board meeting since a 6-year-old boy shot and wounded his first-grade teacher in the classroom.
Don't want to have a family dinner where I talk about where my kids will hide in their school.
One woman said her daughter was in the classroom at Rich Neck Elementary School when teacher Abby Zwerner was shot.
She's 6. She's terrified because the person that was advocating for her got hurt. She got hurt.
She blamed school officials for failing to prevent the shooting. Before the shooting, a school employee had searched the boy's backpack based on a tip, but found no gun.
You guys should have been defending and protect her when she came, or whoever came and said that there was a possible weapon in that child's backpack or otherwise.
Parents expressing anger that this was the third school shooting in the Newport News School District since September of 2021, with one fatality. One parent issuing a warning.
Enough is enough. What will it take? I pray it is not a fourth shooting, because that blood will be on your hands.
One parent said trust in Newport News school officials has been lost at all levels. Parents and teachers said in the Newport News District, many students who disrespect teachers and engage in violence face no consequences. And school officials are accused of downplaying or ignoring disciplinary incidents for favorable statistics.
Ask any teacher in this school division why discipline incidents declined, and I have a feeling the response will be the same. Infraction numbers are down because incidents are not always officially reported.
Some at the meeting called for Newport News School Superintendent George Parker and the entire school board to resign. School officials say they're responding to the shooting by installing metal detectors at all elementary schools in Newport News. And they're considering a rule to require students to bring only transparent backpacks to school. One school security expert calls that security theater.
The number one way we find out about weapons in schools is not from a metal detector, but from a kid who comes forward and tells an adult that they trust. It's about relationships.
You can hear the anger and the desperation in the voices of these parents. Honestly, I don't blame them. I can't blame them one bit. Now, I was a freshman in high school when Kipling Kinkle went into Thurston High School in Eugene, Oregon after murdering his parents and killed 2 students and wounded 25 others. I was a sophomore when Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold went into Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, and murdered 12 students and 1 teacher. Since the year 2000, according to Wikipedia, and this has been updated since the Virginia shooting recently, there have been 403 school shootings. 403! This is an absolutely obscene number. Now, I'm just going to be blunt. We are failing our future generations whenever another school shooting happens. Now, this is just, I'm not being over dramatic here. This is me being as honest as I possibly can be. Far too many people who did nothing but go to school to learn or to teach future generations got murdered, and we haven't done anything to change it. And you know what? We're always making excuses as to why this happens. What are our solutions? What ideas and from thoughts and prayers will someone offer to fix this? Now, when I signed up to serve my country in 2001, I knew the risks that I could possibly face. And I chose field artillery because I'm thinking I'm going to be away from the action. I'm going to be away from getting directly engaged by the enemy. In my 20 years, I took fire from RPGs, RPKs, AK-47 fire, from mortars, from rockets, the whole 9. I mean, my goodness. But you see, the difference between myself and a school teacher is I know the risks I'm going into. I know that there's danger in that line of work. A teacher should not have to worry about that. A student shouldn't have to worry about that. A parent should not have to worry if they're going to see their kids again. It's absolutely ridiculous, the fact that we still have children that have to be traumatized by this. And yet all they do is offer metal detectors, transparent backpacks, and whatnot. Yeah, it might be a temporary fix, but it's not getting to the root of the problem. We are not getting to the root of the problem. Now, the parents of the shooter released a statement. I'm only going to read a section of the statement. Our heart goes out to our son's teacher, and we pray for her healing in the aftermath of such an unimaginable tragedy as she selflessly served our son and the children in the school. That's from the parents. They also indicated that the gun was secured. They are responsible gun owners. Well, obviously, if your son, your 6-year-old son, might I add, got access to the gun because it was not secured. You could say it was locked in the box, but somehow your son got the gun. This is why we've got to crack down on irresponsible gun ownership. Now, you could take this for what you want. You could say, oh, well, wait a second. Well, what about those that are responsible? Listen, I'm not talking about you. Stop playing a victim here. I'm talking about the irresponsible gun owners that don't take responsibility. Should the parents face the consequences? You know what? Yes. Yes, they should. While it might have been the 6-year-old child that pulled the trigger, that child is their responsibility. That child got their gun. Their child got their gun. And yes, they have to face some level of consequences. Because people need to understand, if you're going to be a responsible gun owner, you got to lock up your guns, and you've got to make sure that your 6-year-old freaking children don't get access to these guns. Please, for the love of God. But it's just, we're never going to change anything because the Republicans are going to continue to say, well, wait a second, if you take away guns from law-abiding citizens, you're only going to be taking guns away from law-abiding citizens, and criminals are going to get guns. Listen, we get this. We understand this. We understand that criminals are always going to get guns, but you guys have not offered any solutions to this. You just think more cops on the street is going to solve the problem. More cops on the streets is not going to solve it. You got a problem with cops in general across the country. You got cops that are still doing terrible things and are not gaining trust from the public, so you're obviously not going to fix the problem there. And all you're doing is just moving the goalposts, moving the goalposts, moving the goalposts. That's all you really care about. Listen, I'm all about the Second Amendment, but most of you idiots don't even have an understanding about the Second Amendment, and some of you probably couldn't hit the broadside of a freaking barn with how bad your marksmanship skills are. But you're not going to offer any solutions to these problems. Let alone the fact that you've got children that are misbehaving in school. Now, I'm not going to toot my own horn here, but I was actually a pretty good student in school. It's because, I knew the consequences if I was a bad student. It's not like my parents were going to beat the hell out of me, but I just knew that I was going to get punished, like I was going to get grounded, I was going to have privileges taken away, because that's the part of growing up. All this is going to do is just possibly add more school resource officers, which is proven that school resource officers don't deter gun violence. They actually encourage more gun violence because very rarely do school resource officers work. Teachers and students should not have to worry if this day they come to school, some kid's going to bring a gun to their school. They shouldn't have to worry about that. The only thing a student should have to worry about is, what am I going to learn today? Am I going to pass this test? What am I going to do in PE today? Wonder what they have for cafeteria food today. What am I going to do for football practice? These are the things that kids should have to worry about. They shouldn't have to worry about if another student's going to bring a gun to school. There's comprehensive legislation that was passed last year it was bipartisan support. But we've really got to crack down on what we can do about making schools safer for children. I don't want schools to become prisons where there's bulletproof glass, where there's going to be, metal detectors or school resource officers frisking students. It should not have to come to that. It's going to come to that, though, eventually, because this is what we do. We are reactionary. We have knee-jerk reactions, but we're never going to get to the root of the problem, to the heart of the problem. The gentleman said at the very end, it's a relationship problem. The relationship between the teachers and the students. The relationship between the teachers and the parents. A lot of it comes down to understanding and knowing your audience, knowing your students, knowing the kids, knowing the teachers. There is so much that plays into this. But I already know the lawmakers are not going to do jack diddly squat about that. Because the NRA is going to get inside of our heads saying, they're coming for your guns, they're coming for your guns. Because they care more about guns than they care about the lives of children and the teachers that are affected by these violent acts. So, Ronnie DeSantis has a problem with racial classes yet again. When I first heard about this, all I thought was, again? Listen to this clip from ABC News.
This morning, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' administration is blocking an AP African American Studies high school course, saying the class would violate state law.
I don't know what the basis of this thought is. It's downright painful to people of color.
This new college-level pilot course takes students from pre-colonial Africa to modern protest movements. In a letter to the College Board, which oversees AP courses, Florida's Department of Education rejected approval of the course, saying it's inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value, adding that if the course comes into compliance and incorporates historically accurate content, Florida Department of Education will always be willing to reopen the discussion. The rejection follows the governor's effort to limit discussion of race in school. Last year, DeSantis signed the Stop Woke Act, restricting race-based conversation and analysis in the business and education sectors. He's made other headline-making education moves as well. Signing the bill critics refer to as the Don't Say Gay law.
We will make sure that parents can send their kids to school to get an education, not in indoctrination.
But one state senator is raising questions about the AP course rejection, tweeting this list of all the other ethnic AP courses he says are offered in Florida and saying it's crazy how AP African American Studies made the chopping block in Florida. The course is already being taught in more than 60 schools across the country, with many more planned next school year.
This guy is an absolute moron. I mean, Ron DeSantis is an absolute moron. Let's just cut down to brass tacks. What exactly is he scared of? Why is it African American Studies got the chopping block exactly? I mean, the other classes which are acceptable in Florida are as follows: AP European History, AP Art History, AP Japanese Language and Culture, AP German Language and Culture, AP Italian Language and Culture, and AP Spanish Language and Culture. Now, what exactly are they so goddamned afraid of? That young black students will actually learn history? Or even white students are going to learn about history? It's bad enough to learn that certain parts of the country, places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, people don't even realize that Black Wall Street got burnt to the ground because it wasn't covered in their history books. Now, some people found out it happened from the TV series Watchmen. That's right, an HBO TV series, Watchmen, is how some people learned about the Tulsa massacre of Black Wall Street. I think it's absolutely shameful that so many of us don't learn about the real history in our own damn country. Last time I checked, African Americans is American history. Now, for people who are just too sensitive here about what courses like these African American studies or Native American studies or Latin American studies, whatever American studies, you need to understand this. History is not meant to be politically correct. History is not something that we should only be told by the words of the victors. History is meant to tell the story of what actually happened. And our inability to tell the real story of history is what led people to believe for so many years that Christopher Columbus is some kind of hero to look up to, when he isn't. He was a complete asshole, actually. A failure to tell history is the greatest bit of cancel culture that there is. There is so much that we do not learn about our history. It's pathetic. There are southern schools that try to teach about how slaves were not treated poorly. They were actually treated quite nicely by their slave owners. Or we're taught that George Washington was an honest man that wasn't a slave owner. George Washington was a frickin' slave-owning bastard. He beat the hell out of his slaves when they ran away. You know, it's not popular to learn about these things, but history is not meant to be popular. It's meant to be told in its entire form. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, you need to understand something. Talking about issues like race is going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to make black people uncomfortable. It's going to make Hispanic people uncomfortable. It's going to make Asian people uncomfortable. It's going to make white people uncomfortable, for crying out loud. But you know what? It's necessary to learn these topics. And are you really going to sit here and tell me that certain demographics, certain ethnicities are not responsible enough to learn about the atrocities of history in our past without freaking out about it? It really is up to the teacher in how they display it and how they present the material, and make sure they understand, listen, we did some screwed up things in the past, but this is what we did afterwards. But you've got to tell history in its entire form. It's bad enough that, like, for example, when I first listened to the book, The Rape of Nanking, it was the most traumatizing shit I'd ever heard of. Like, there were Nazis that saw what the Japanese were doing to the Chinese, and they were like, whoa, that's pretty excessive right there. When you got Nazis that are like, wow, that's turning my stomach, you know that you're definitely on the wrong side of history. But the Japanese completely disavow that this took place in Nanking. They say that that's a complete, fabrication. And so obviously the Chinese were a little miffed when we took the side of the Japanese after a while and became allies with the Japanese instead of the Chinese. Now, the Chinese have every right to be pissed off that the Japanese won't, acknowledge what happened. It would be like us not wanting to acknowledge what we did to the indigenous Native Americans, what we did to the black slaves, the Asian slaves, what have you. Acknowledgement of what we did does not make you weaker. It teaches you that's like, yeah, we were terrible. We were awful. We've got to recognize this. It's got to be taught. African American studies should be taught, honestly. And if white students want to learn about it, go for it. African American studies should not be just for one group to learn. It should be for everybody to learn, as a matter of fact. Because understanding, your culture, because there are a lot of black people that can't trace their family ancestry. I can. I could trace my family ancestry back to the 1600s, for crying out loud. There are people in this country that can't trace their family history beyond when they were first brought here against their will in the 1600s, for crying out loud. So I've got the privilege of tracing my ancestry back that far. Most people can't trace their ancestry back that far, and that's unfortunate. knowing who you are and where you come from is really important to your identity. I know who I am. I know where I came from. And I like learning about it every chance I get. When you take this away from students, you're not helping anybody. You're actually crippling them because they're going to learn about this shit all the same. You've got nothing to hide. And you're saying, oh, well, you know, I feel it's too vague. I feel it needs to be taught properly. Well, guess what? Why don't you present us? What's proper to you, Mr. DeSantis? Governor DeSantis, I want you to tell us what is proper for you. What is proper education for you? You're not a teacher. I'm not a school teacher, for crying out loud. But what is proper for these children, these future leaders of our country? What should they be learning about African American studies? They're not going to learn anything if you take it away from them. And the fact that you're saying you're banning CRT because you're afraid of wokeism? I just don't understand this. You're afraid of something you don't understand. But of course, then again, mankind has always been afraid of that which it does not understand. This is not a frightening topic. It might be uncomfortable, but you know what? It is uncomfortable talking about these topics, especially when you hear about slavery, especially when you hear about things that, you know, the conditions that slaves were kept in. But I'm not just talking about slavery. I'm talking about like after slavery. After the abolishment of slavery, black people were still treated poorly. Hell, even before the civil rights movement, black people weren't even allowed to drink from the same water fountain. But that should not be the entirety of their history. They've contributed to our society. They fought in our wars. They have contributed. They've you know, given us great inventions that we use to this day, like the air conditioning unit, if I'm not mistaken. But yet, all we focus upon is just slavery and Martin Luther King, and that's it. That's black history. That's African American history. That's all you need to know. That's bullshit. We need to learn as much as we need to know, because that our diversity is our strength in our country. But all you're doing is you're crippling future generations because of what? Your fear, your cowardice, you're afraid of what they might learn. You don't think they're responsible to learn about their history, about our history. This is our history. This is American history. And you're crippling students by taking this away from them, Governor Ron DeSantis, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself, but you're not going to be, because you're just appealing to the masses that voted for you because you're afraid of looking weak. That's why you voted against wokeness. That's why you voted against CRT, and that's why you voted against African American studies. Shame on you. The last topic I'm going to cover tonight, and I've gone a little bit overboard, but you know, I didn't do a show last week, so 3 people got sentenced to life in prison after killing a Flint security guard at a Family Dollar in May of 2020 in Flint, Michigan. Calvin Mutterland was just doing his job enforcing mask mandates. When Mutterland yelled at a woman who wasn't wearing a mask at the time, she left, and then shortly came back in and confronted the security guard for yelling at this woman. And the other person that was between the 2 people, the other person shot the security guard. The people convicted was Larry Teague and his wife, Charmel Teague, and her son, Ramanya Bishop. They were convicted of first-degree premeditated murder in November of last year. Now, let's make no mistake about this. Let's not sugarcoat this. 2020 was a very, very hectic year for so many of us. COVID drove people apart, and it made life very, very difficult. Hell, to this day, COVID is still a threat because people are still not taking it seriously. They still think it's engineered by the Chinese in order to get Trump out of office. They still think it was a China virus. They throw out all kinds of derogatory terms for it and blame Asian people for this. People still think the vaccine causes some form of autism, or it gives you a higher chance of developing serious heart problems after receiving multiple vaccinations. It's rhetoric like this of people not wanting to wear masks that led to the death of that security guard who was just doing his job at a Dollar General. People not wanting to wear masks led to retaliation that did not need to happen. It's things like this that drive me crazy. I love my country, but I get so sick and tired of the stupid people that are in it. And I mean, there's stupid people of any shape and form. It's the lack of education, the lack of understanding that these mask mandates were put in place for a reason. Now, it's not guaranteed that the mask was going to prevent, the spread of COVID, but it was going to mitigate it greatly. And it's not necessarily like if I wear a mask and somebody else doesn't, that if they cough on me, I'm still not going to get it. It's if I have COVID and somebody else doesn't, I have less of a chance to passing it on to them because I'm wearing a mask. That's why we have these masks. They were there for a reason. But this person did not want to wear a mask. She went and got 2 people who came in who killed Calvin Mutterland for just doing his damn job. And that's a shame. People made up reasons as to why they didn't want to wear the masks. They said it was because of their constitutional rights to not wear a mask. They felt that this was inhibiting their freedom. They started using human trafficking as a reason to why not wear the mask. They were going to the ends of the earth. They were trying to find any reason to not wear a mask, which is ridiculous. Now, I know some people's like, well, I didn't wear a mask. It's like, all right. I can say, well, I wear a mask and this is why. Because it's for my protection and for your protection. But you still have people out there too hard-headed to do so. You believe the conspiracy theories. You listen to people that were not experts. You listen to people that didn't have any basis and had no arguments to back it up with. And you listen to people like Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., who insisted that there was mercury that was affecting children and that was giving children autism. Listen, there is no proof of this whatsoever. And any doctor that says, oh, vaccines cause autism, but he doesn't have a study to back it up with, that's a bad doctor. Go to somebody else. Get another opinion, please. It's absolutely ridiculous and it's absolutely ludicrous that we are still dealing with these issues. It's absolutely ludicrous that we are still dealing with these problems. And I'm glad that Calvin Mutterland's family got the justice they deserved, but it's really unfortunate that it had to lead to this point. Before I go, I just want to take the time to once again thank everybody that's listening on the replay, and has gone back and has left me good feedback. I appreciate everybody that listens to my podcast, and I appreciate everybody that's continued to show me support over the years. And I want to thank everybody that says that they really enjoy my beer podcasts. And guess what? If you like my beer podcast and change the station, that's all that matters to me. I like talking about beer, and I love talking about the current events right now. I just want to take the time to thank everybody, all the fans, all the listeners and whatnot, and all my friends that have shown me support over the years. I could not do this without you. Thank you so much. And I hope everybody has a safe weekend. It's cold out there, and hopefully everyone stays safe. And I'll see you next time on the next episode of Current Events on Tap. This has been a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project. We hope you enjoy this podcast. Thank you and good night.